I used to think that love faded like old paint, inevitable, natural, and not worth fighting. It had been 15 years since Daniel and I last danced in the kitchen, since our lips met without obligation. Now, at 47, my mornings began with the whir of his electric toothbrush and ended with the soft sigh of a man who no longer saw me. Daniel, my husband of 23 years, was a good man. Dependable, responsible, faithful in the mechanical sense. A dentist by profession, his world was polished and precise. He liked black coffee, firm handshakes, and the news at 6. I used to find comfort in that predictability, but somewhere along the line, comfort had calcified into something colder. Our home reflected the stillness of our marriage. Beige walls, muted art, silence broken only by cutlery tapping on ceramic during dinner. We used to share stories, jokes, touches. Now we shared space. One Thursday morning, while buttering his toast, Daniel glanced at the calendar and muttered, "You have your physical therapy at 4. "That was last week," I replied softly. He nodded, unfazed, and sipped his coffee. I stared at him for a moment, not angry, just tired. Later that day, I met Lena at a cafe downtown. She was my best friend and possibly the only person who noticed I was disappearing. "You should come to the art workshop with me this weekend," she said, stirring honey into her tea. I shook my head. "I haven't painted since college." "Exactly," she said. "You used to love it. You need something. Anything." I said yes, not because I believed it would help, but because I couldn't remember the last time I did something just for myself. The community center was loud with color and chatter. Long tables were lined with sketch pads, acrylics, brushes, and mason jars, and at the center of it all stood Ethan. He wasn't what I expected. Mid-30s, lean, a little scruffy, with messy hair that curled at the ends. His jeans were paint-stained, his smile quick and easy. There was something magnetic about him, though he didn't seem to notice it himself. "Welcome," he said, offering a paintbrush like a handshake. "You must be Lena's friend, Nora, right?" "Yes," I replied, surprised he remembered. "I'm Ethan. Just grab a canvas. No pressure here, just expression." I sat by the window, brushing dust off a canvas and feeling awkward. Still, when I dipped my brush into cerulean and dragged it across the white, something flickered. A memory, maybe. A version of myself I hadn't visited in decades. Ethan made his rounds, offering gentle comments. "Interesting color layering," he said, peering over my shoulder. "It's like you're hiding a story underneath." I laughed. "Maybe I am." His smile softened. "We all are." When the class ended, I lingered, helping tidy brushes. Lena had left early, and others were gone. Ethan leaned against the table beside mine. "You have a strong sense of mood," he said. "Do you paint often?" "Not anymore," I said. "Life got busy." He nodded, understanding more than I'd said aloud. "Well, you should. Keep at it. There's something in your work that's trying to breathe." That night, I returned home with paint on my fingers and a pulse I hadn't felt in years. I told Daniel about the class, about Ethan, about the smell of oil and canvas and forgotten joy. He responded with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's nice," he said, scrolling through emails. "Dinner's on the counter." Looked at the reheated leftovers, then at the man who once brought me wildflowers on Thursdays. He was still here, still wearing the same cologne, still setting the alarm at exactly 9:30 p.m. But I was starting to wonder if I was still here. As I got ready for bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Same lines around the eyes, same tired skin. But something was different, subtle, unspoken. A flicker of light behind my expression, a trace of color returning to grayscale. I didn't go to the workshop looking for anything, but something found me anyway. And I didn't know it then. But that simple decision, to hold a brush again, was the first crack in a wall I'd spent years pretending wasn't there. I kept returning to the workshop, not because I fancied myself an artist, but because something inside me had stirred, and I wasn't ready to let it settle. Ethan didn't push, but he noticed. Every week, he'd greet me with the same smile and an easel already set aside. He'd offer suggestions, ask questions that dug deeper than "how are you?" And he listened, which somehow felt more intimate than touch. One afternoon, I arrived early. The room was still quiet, lit only by the soft spill of sunlight through the tall windows. Ethan was sketching at the far end. He looked up and smiled. "Couldn't wait for the others," he teased. "I just wanted a little silence," I replied. "It's the only kind that doesn't feel lonely." He looked at me for a beat longer than usual, then gestured to the stool beside him. I sat down. "You always paint skies," he said, "but there's never a sun." I gave a half smile. Maybe I'm still looking for it. His eyes didn't leave mine. "Maybe it's closer than you think." I changed the subject, suddenly aware of the warmth creeping into my cheeks. That evening, I returned home to find Daniel working late again. A note on the fridge read, "Long day. Don't wait up." I microwaved leftovers and ate alone, the hum of the appliance my only company. I stared at my phone longer than I should have, thumb hovering over Ethan's contact. I didn't message him. I didn't need to. The next week, it rained, an unrelenting drizzle that blurred the windows and made the whole world feel slower. Class was nearly empty, just 3 students and Ethan. When they left, I stayed behind to help pack up. "I love rainy days," Ethan said as he stacked canvases. "It's like the world pauses long enough for us to catch up." He offered me a mug of tea, and we sat by the window, watching the droplets race down the glass. The silence between us was no longer awkward. It was charged, heavy with something unspoken. "I used to think growing older meant growing dull," I said, half laughing, as if the world just stops offering you wonder. He turned toward me. "You're not dull, Nora. You're just not seen." The words hit like a whisper shouted in a cathedral. I looked away, blinking too fast. "I shouldn't be here this late," I murmured. "Daniel's probably wondering." He didn't reply, just watched me. The air between us crackled. Then, without fanfare or warning, he reached out and touched my hand, gentle, deliberate. I didn't pull away. My fingers curled around his like muscle memory, and in that moment, the world tipped. His thumb traced a slow line across my knuckles. It wasn't lustful. It was something more dangerous. Affection. Recognition. When he leaned in, I didn't move. Our lips met softly, with hesitation, with apology, with longing. The kiss was quiet, but it echoed. It didn't last more than a breath, but it was enough to collapse the fragile wall I'd built around my loneliness. I pulled back first. "This can't happen," I said, though the tremble in my voice betrayed me. "I know," he whispered, eyes searching mine. "I'm sorry." I grabbed my bag and left, my pulse thudding in my ears, shame and exhilaration battling inside me. Driving home, I rehearsed explanations I would never give. It was just a moment. It didn't mean anything. I didn't go looking for it. But the truth sat in my chest like a stone. I had felt something. And worse, I didn't want to forget it. At home, Daniel was asleep on the couch, glasses tilted, TV murmuring the end of a documentary. I stood there watching him. This man I'd built a life with, paid mortgages with, raised holidays and habits with. I touched his shoulder. He stirred, blinked up at me. "Hey," he mumbled. "Didn't hear you come in." I smiled thinly. It's late. He nodded, eyes already closing again. In the quiet of our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the shadow of myself in the darkened mirror. I didn't feel like a cheater. I felt like a woman starving for connection who had tasted something real, and that terrified me. The line had been crossed, not just the kiss, but everything leading to it. The laughter, the conversations, the way Ethan made me feel, seen, alive. I hadn't made a choice yet, but I knew one was coming. And nothing in my life was as certain as it had been just days ago. For days after the kiss, I walked through my life like I was made of glass, fragile, reflective, and dangerously transparent. Every mundane act felt magnified. Folding laundry, answering emails, listening to Daniel talk about a new dental chair at the clinic. I nodded at the right times, smiled when expected, but inside, I was a tangle of guilt and awakening. I avoided the workshop. I told Lena I wasn't feeling well. It was partly true. Something inside me was unwell, too much longing, not enough certainty. I thought space would make things clearer, but all it did was sharpen the contrast. Ethan didn't reach out, and I didn't expect him to. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't hurt more. On the third morning, Daniel noticed. "You've been quiet lately," he said over breakfast, pouring milk into his cereal. I looked at him. Really looked. His face was familiar, worn by time, lined by routine. I used to love every crease. Now, I wasn't sure what I was looking for. "I've been thinking," I said slowly, "about us." He set the carton down, expression guarded. "What about us?" "I don't know when it happened," I continued, voice low. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like your wife. I became your roommate." He blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Is this about the art thing?" "No," I said. "It's about the silence between us, the distance. We share a house, but not a life anymore." He frowned, defensive. "So now what? You want to leave?" I hesitated. "I don't know what I want yet, but I do know I can't keep pretending." "Everything's fine." For a moment, the only sound was the quiet crackle of cereal softening in milk. He stood, frustrated, but not angry. "I never stopped loving you, Nora. I just didn't think you needed anything more." That struck a nerve. That's the problem. You didn't think. You didn't ask. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The walls we'd carefully built were beginning to crumble, and neither of us knew how to hold them up anymore. Later that day, I returned to the studio. The room smelled of paint and pine wood. Ethan was alone, brushing pale yellow onto a canvas that looked like early morning. He saw me and froze. "I didn't think you'd come back," he said quietly. "I needed to," I replied. "Not for us. For me." He nodded, stepping aside to give me space. I stood beside him, unsure of what I was even looking for. "I can't be what you want," I said, forcing the words out. "I'm still married, and whatever this was, it crossed a line." "I know," he said. "I never meant to make your life harder." "You didn't. You reminded me I was still capable of feeling, of dreaming, of being more than a shadow in my own life." He smiled gently, sadness flickering in his eyes. "Then maybe I did what I was supposed to." I didn't kiss him goodbye. We didn't make promises. We just stood there for a moment. Two people who collided at the wrong time but woke something, honest in each other. When I left, I felt lighter. Back home, Daniel and I agreed to try counseling. We sat in an office that smelled like vanilla and nerves, speaking truths that had gone unsaid for too long. He listened more. I revealed more. But even as we talked, I began to understand. Some rifts are deeper than forgiveness. Weeks passed. The effort was real, but the damage was quiet and old, like wallpaper peeling behind a framed picture, unseen but inevitable. Eventually, I packed a suitcase and moved into a modest apartment near the art center. There was no drama, no shouting, just understanding. Daniel hugged me at the door, whispering, "I hope you find what you're looking for." I teach painting classes now. Nothing big, just beginners on Saturdays. I hang my own work in the hallway and drink wine with Lena on weekends. I'm not in love. I'm not chasing anyone. But I've returned to myself. Sometimes, when I walk by the studio, I see Ethan teaching a group of teenagers. He always smiles when he sees me, and I smile back. There's no ache, just quiet gratitude. Because he didn't break my marriage. It was already broken. He simply held up a mirror and let me see the truth. I thought I was too old for change. I thought my life was too set to shift. But it turns out, change doesn't care about age. It waits for courage. And when you finally open the door, it walks in gently, brush in hand, and paints you a new beginning.